Hello and welcome to the Federalist YouTube channel. My name is Tristan Justice, reporting out here in Denver. And joining me today is Mr. Phill Kline, the director of the Amistad Project, leading several lawsuits around the country regarding these recent elections. Mr. Kline, how are you doing?
I'm well. It's great to be with you, Tristan.
Awesome. So I want to talk about your group's ongoing litigation with Facebook. And so in early September, the tech giant deployed a massive campaign operation. Zuckerberg dumped about I think it was $250 million in an effort in September to deploy these drop boxes around the country. Your group has contended that a lot of these drop boxes were put in heavily Democratic areas to influence turnout. Could you start off by kind of telling me a little bit more about that?
Sure. I'll start with your question and back up. But Zuckerberg actually ends up giving over $400 million into the election, $350 million to the Center for Tech and Civic Life. And I'll give you an example of how the drop boxes work. But I then, if it's okay, Tristan, like to take you back to March of 2020 when all of this started to frame itself out. Let's take Delaware County, Pennsylvania, Democrat stronghold. There's one drop box for every 4 square miles. That's 2 miles by 2 miles square, or a drop box within a mile of everybody's home. In the 59 counties that Trump won, there's one drop box for every 1,159 square miles. So at the same time, the Democrat governor, Governor Wolf, was shutting down in-person polling, making it harder in a generation for many of these rural areas to vote. They were telling people in the urban core that would vote for Biden, you just go on a stroll. Republicans go on a weekend vacation and find Waldo. That's not right. And Zuckerberg shouldn't play a part in that. Now, the most egregious example of what they did, though, we received documents pursuant to court order that demonstrated the communications between the Center for Tech and Civic Life, that's who Zuckerberg gave $350 million to, and the CT tells Philadelphia to do is how to manage the elections, how many polling places they'll have. They will pay for the machines. They actually provided the salaries for election judges, those who determine what ballots to count and how those ballots will be counted. They paid the people who boarded up the windows and kicked the Republicans out of the counting room. So at a time when America wants transparent elections. You might recall Bush v. Gore. We were all watching the hanging chads and the dimpled chads and whether we should count it as a vote. That's because we had a transparent election. Now America gets kicked out of the counting room and a billionaire is inside the counting room. And that's a serious problem. Now, taking you back, March 2020. A man by the name of David Plouffe, Obama's former campaign manager, is working for Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, in the Zuckerberg-Chan charitable initiative. At that time, Plouffe authors a book called The Citizen's Guide to Defeating Donald Trump. He states on page 81 of that book that the 2020 election will come down to a block-by-block street fight to turn out the vote in Philadelphia, Detroit, and Milwaukee. And guess where the Zuckerberg money flows to turn out the vote? In Democrat strongholds, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. You see this plan starting to be executed as far back as March of 2020.
So Facebook really concentrated where they put these ballot drop boxes, right? They put them in these predominantly blue cities. Who decides exactly where these drop boxes go? Are they election officials? Are they officials with Facebook? Or, I mean, who decides this drop box goes on this street corner as opposed to that street corner?
Well, as early as April of this year, this charity that I'm talking about started to reach out to Democrat mayors. It sent a note to the mayor of Racine, Wisconsin, and it said, look, we're going to give you $100,000, and we want you to use $60,000 for yourself. Then take $10,000 and go out and recruit Green Bay, recruit Milwaukee, recruit these Democrat strongholds, and you guys come up with what we call a fair election plan. And then we will approve it for a grant for a lot of money. Now, this is before Zuckerberg's even given. So they're counting on this Zuckerberg money. There's already knowledge it's going to be there. And so they design a plan That is where the drop boxes, how many drop boxes, the consolidation of the counting centers. And let me focus on that a second, Tristan. The consolidation of the counting centers was done in every area where Zuckerberg money was. And so we went from small counting rooms to these giant arenas for the counting rooms. And they claimed they did it because of COVID, which makes a lot of sense to me, to draw a crowd to protect against COVID. But that's what they did. But here's what it enabled. All the state laws in every state say a Republican must be in the place of the counting. Well, they said, yeah, he's in the place. He's just up in the cheap seats where he can't see anything. So they were able to exclude any scrutiny from one party. That's unlawful, by the way. And then additionally, they justified delivering hundreds of thousands of ballots to one location. Well, that with the drop boxes, where there wasn't a chain of custody of the ballots. We don't know who picked up the drop boxes. We don't know if it was a Republican and a Democrat, or if it was Joey with BLM, or Freddie with young Republicans who might have ditched a few on the way back to the counting center. We don't know who picked them up. We don't know when they were picked up.
These weren't government officials who picked up the ballots. These were just, I mean, we have no clue. We have no transparency who was actually picking up these thousands of votes dropped in these boxes and taking them to the voting centers.
They were supposed to keep logs. Has anybody seen the logs? They were supposed to have video. By the way, the video cameras in Delaware County were solar powered.
In November. Amazing.
Yes, yes, yes.
So can all of this, can any of this count as a monetary contribution to the Democrats here? I mean, if you're putting up ballot boxes of government-led elections, you're putting up ballot boxes in all these Democratic strongholds, and you're essentially facilitating what is supposed to be a government-run election. Can't that be counted as a monetary contribution?
Well, I think clearly this is not supported by the law, and these local governments acted unlawfully in accepting these funds. I don't know if you could win that it's a campaign contribution in this sense. They'll say, well, we allowed Republicans to use the drop boxes in Philadelphia County. Yeah, all 15 of them. So, all 15 Republicans in the city. So I clearly believe it shows the intent, and it violates equal protection. We created a two-tier election system, one for Democrat strongholds, one for Republican strongholds. I don't think we could call it, even though the intent is clear, an unlawful campaign contribution.
Okay. So lead me through where we are with litigation on this. I understand your group has launched a series of lawsuits dominantly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I have down Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. All states decided by razor-thin margins. Minnesota less so, but I mean, talking Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, those were close races. And so I understand that a judge has thrown out lawsuits in Michigan and Wisconsin, but are there still any cases going on in the other states?
Oh, there are a lot. And we're also in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia. And the Zuckerberg suits, or the suits against CTCL, that's who the party is, or I mean, the local election officials, have not been thrown out. We just weren't able to get a temporary restraining order to prevent it. But now that we have the harm, we get to go to trial on it. It just won't impact this election. Now, we filed other suits that might impact this election. We now have the proof of what all of this opening the door for fraud has caused. And we filed suits in each one of these states where we actually hired experts. We took the state information on who voted, who didn't vote, and when they voted. And then we actually called hundreds of thousands of voters to see if what the state says happened actually happened with that voter. And we have found hundreds of thousands of voters who said, I didn't vote, but guess what? The record shows they voted. Or I didn't request a ballot, the record shows somebody requested it for them. Or I voted, and the record shows they didn't vote. Those records are proof of the problem with how this election was run. And the problems were the violation of state laws, the ignoring of the legislature's role in managing the election, and it happened everywhere Zuckerberg money was found in the urban core.
So this is, I mean, everyone talks about big tech election interference. They talk about the Hunter Biden stories. They talk about the censorship. But this seems, I mean, to me, this seems far more substantive because Facebook is coming in and essentially facilitating these elections. I mean, am I wrong here?
Well, the Zuckerberg contribution to this election that we've been able to track so far, the federal government's appropriation for the election in 2020. We have a shadow government. We are creating a corporate oligarchy. Think about this. If you go back and the United States was involved in trying to take over a government, or you go back into the revolutions that locked down Russia in tyranny for a while under the Soviet Union, and you see what the strategy was. It was twofold. You control the flow of information. And how many times to listen to Mr. Zuckerberg or, the big tech folks, billionaires, say, you know what, America, you're too stupid to handle information and discern the truth. So let us determine the truth for you. And it's stunning to me that much of the left has signed on to that, but they have, that Americans are too stupid and they're going to tell us what the truth is. And then we don't have a voice to counter that. So you control the flow of information. The second thing you do, control the way a nation selects its leaders.
No, I think you're absolutely right, especially when you're talking about controlling the flow of information. Now Facebook is contracting out to these third-party fact-checker groups, which it funds, by the way. And one of them, Lead Stories, I'm sure you've seen this. Lead Stories. It's a group that's funded by even Chinese ByteDance, which owns TikTok. They started fact-checking one of our fact checks to their fact check about Georgia election fraud. It just seems to me that big tech now is not only just controlling the flow of information, but they want to have a monopoly on what is true. And of course, that creates problems in the space that we're talking about with these election issues that need to be decided in court. And I want to go back to some of the litigation for a minute. You said earlier that you have some cases that might not influence the outcome of this election. But why would that be? If we had issues in this election and we have cases about this election, they wouldn't impact this election?
Well, there are some cases that still could, but the problem with the way our laws are is they're not written for this type of an election. In fact, it's a white paper we put out last week regarding these deadlines for the Electoral College. You go back through their history, and they're premised on how long it takes to ride a horse to Washington, D.C. You had to get the electors around the nation time to get to the Capitol to vote. A lot of these laws, state election laws, as far as challenging the election, were written for a different day and not for today. The truth is, we could, if the laws mandated, we could effectively audit through access to ballots and access to the computer logs. And guess what our election laws do not allow? The forensic and random selection of ballots and analysis, and the forensic acceptance of computer logs. The two things that we can use to determine the truth now are beyond our reach in all of this. So the laws aren't designed to bring about a solution to this problem. And this was an unprecedented problem. I really believe most people have a hard time if they just step back and look at the work stoppages, look at the ballot dumps, look at how you went to bed at 3 a.m. when President Trump was ahead in all of these states, and when you woke up and suddenly a big ballot dump occurred for Biden into these giant counting centers where no Republicans were present. That is a problem. And so we deserve to have the opportunity to investigate. And in fact, we're filing a suit later today that say these election deadlines for the college are arbitrary. We need to be able to allow to move forward. And Texas filed suit just like that this morning in the United States Supreme Court against these 5 states. So there's still a fight on. But what I'm saying is our suits are going to continue to get to the truth because we can't let this happen again.
The irony of big tech taking over elections built for the Pony Express. I just to wrap up here, where do we go from this? I mean, what's next? Do you have confidence that some of these cases will be successful, and then we'll have successful election reform laws for the next election? Maybe it's 2022 or 2024. I mean, what's next?
Well, the cases to be successful might affect this election. But the cases don't have to be successful to affect the next election. The American people have to stand up and say, look, we're not going to tolerate this. Your election brought to you by Facebook or by the National Rifle Association or by the Koch brothers, or you punch in a vote on a machine and the Geico pops up and says, thank you for choosing Geico, save 15 minutes on your car insurance. No, that's not what elections are. And that can change through policy, through legislation, and hopefully through litigation. But, I've always thought the strength of our nation is America gets what it wants, and the weakness of our nation is America gets what it wants. And if enough people wake up and say, look, I know it's not affecting me directly right now, but it is getting close. I'm going to say something. This is wrong. Then we'll choose the right path.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Kline, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.